And when you're hearing like Mamdani talk about freezing rents and taking bad landlords and then confiscating their property, you're like, this is step one of what's happened in every communist dictatorship throughout history.
There's a bill sitting in a committee right now that says a government board can take your building even when it was never for sale. And you don't get a vote. You've got no say in the matter. This is not a court, not a jury, a board, 9 people. If they decide your property is, their word, necessary, they can start the paperwork to take it, hand you a check for whatever they say it's worth, and there is no line on that form for you to decline. It's a real bill. It's in New York. The section number is right there on the screen. And before you tell yourself that's a New York problem, the same blueprint just got written into a bill in Congress, which means this organized seizure is on its way to your state. So if you own something, a home, a couple of rental doors, the building your business sits in, you're probably starting to feel the ground moving under you, even if you haven't been able to quite point at the exact reason why. Well, if you've been paying attention at all, that reason is starting to come into focus more and more each day. And look, if the authors of this bill just came out and said, we're going to legally requisition your property, please go F yourself, I would almost respect the sheer terrifying honesty of it. But they didn't do that. Instead, we have a bill with 34 separate sections. Why do you need 34 sections of dense, suffocating legalese to take someone's property? Why all this heavy machinery about right of first refusal and distressed asset designation and tenant assistance? Why build a machine of bureaucratic misery just to steal your house? The answer, in 2 words, Maciej Rakosi. Now I know, you have no idea who that is. I didn't either up until about an hour ago. I mean, we're Americans, which means most of our historical education likely stopped at the Boston Tea Party and a vague, lingering belief that Abraham Lincoln was a vampire hunter. But stay with me, because this is the whole thing. Hungary, 1945. World War II has just ended. The whole country looks like someone kicked over a massive Lego city and then set the plastic on fire. People are exhausted. They don't want grand political visions. They just want a sandwich, a nap, and maybe 5 consecutive minutes where the sky isn't exploding. Then this guy shows up, Maciej Rakosi. He's a hardline communist, and he wants to run the whole country. But he's got a problem. Nobody wants him to. His party just got absolutely destroyed in the election. The moderate smallholders party won in a landslide, 57-17. So Rakosi knows he can't just waltz in, pop a bottle of champagne and announce, hey everybody, good news, I'm your new ruthless dictator. That would be like showing up to a child's birthday party and blowing out their candles. People would notice and people would fight back. So he does something infinitely sneakier. He doesn't try to steal the whole country at once. He steals it one tiny, utterly boring piece at a time. Here's the trick. Imagine someone wants to steal your bicycle. They can't just roll up to your driveway in broad daylight, throw your Huffy into the back of a truck and drive off. Your whole street would see that. Your neighbor would call the cops. Your dog would absolutely lose its mind. So instead, they walk by at 2 a.m. and they take the handlebar grips. You wake up, you notice, but honestly, it's not that big of a deal, right? You tell yourself, well, whatever, I'll ride without them. And next week, they take one pedal. Annoying, deeply annoying. But you tell yourself, hey, it's just one pedal, I'll deal with it. I'll push off the ground with my feet and I'll coast for a while. Then the seat goes, then a wheel, then the chain, then the frame. And every single time you think the exact same thing, hey, it's only one part, and it's not worth calling the cops over. Until one day you walk outside in your helmet and spandex and realize there is no bike left. You are just a middle-aged man standing in a driveway in painfully tight shorts staring at empty space. That is exactly how Rakosi stole an entire European nation. First, he went after one rival politician, and his excuse sounded just reasonable enough that most people shrugged and thought, well, I guess that guy was kind of shady. And everyone else looked around and said, well, that's got nothing to do with me. I'm safe, I'm fine. Then he took the next slice, a different person, a different excuse. The public says, still not me. Then the next slice, still not me. Then the next. And every single time, the exact people who had the power to stop him told themselves the exact same thing. let's just wait. This one isn't really worth the fight. And it gets worse, because that was the genius of it. Not good genius, evil genius. He made every step look too small, too bureaucratic, and too boring to freak out over. Nobody goes to war over one slice of salami, right? I mean, if your roommate takes one slice of salami from the fridge, you don't burn the apartment down. But if you let someone keep slicing, eventually, there is no salami left. So one group, one rule, one office, one excuse, one slice at a time. And by the time the Hungarian people finally woke up and realized what had happened to their democracy, they weren't even arguing about the first slice anymore. They were staring at an empty plate, wondering where all the deli meat went. By 1949, Rákosi owned the country outright. The country surrendered to him, piece by piece. Which brings us back to this 34-section property bill. They won't steal your property in broad daylight. You wouldn't stand for that. But you will ignore a rent freeze in New York City, because chances are you don't live in a New York apartment. And they haven't technically taken total control of the buildings, but this organized invasion has begun. The Democratic Socialists of America, the DSA.
Those fucking people scare me. They think that socialism just hasn't been done correctly. And I do not think they understand the dangers of this ideology, because it always leads to one thing. It leads to a very powerful military government that controls the population. Period. Yep. End of discussion. And if you play it out, it is literally the only way they can get people to give up their money.
Yes.
It's the only way they can get them to give up their property.
Salami tactics, or salami taktika in Hungarian, wasn't a term coined decades later by some smug Oxford historian analyzing the fall of Eastern Europe. Maciej Rákosi coined it himself. The dictator who stole the country literally invented the catchy marketing term to brag about how he did it to his fellow communists and pay it forward for future communist generations to use. Hello, DSA. If the New York rent freeze was the first slice, let's look at some other slices in this bill. Section 7. The authority can buy up vacant or, quote, underdeveloped property. And your gut says maybe, good, buy the abandoned lot. Buy the burned out shell nobody's touched in 10 years. Who's against that? Nobody. That's the point. That's the next slice. Another one that goes down easy. But read how they define underdeveloped. It's property that isn't being used for its, quote, highest and best use, as decided by, and I want you to hear this exact phrase, the sole discretion of the corporation. In plain English, underdeveloped doesn't mean empty. It means they've decided your property could be doing something they'd rather it do. The little house on the big lot, the one-story shop on a block they think should be apartments, they hold the ruler, and they decide what measures up. Next slice, Section 9. When a, quote, distressed building with 3 or more units goes to sell, the state gets first crack at it, a right of first refusal. The owner has to offer it to the government before anybody else. And again, sounds fine, right? Troubled building, state steps in, keeps the people housed, reasonable slice. Now read how they define distressed. One of the ways a building qualifies, it carries, quote, a lien for unpaid municipal arrears. That's a tax lien. Fall behind on your taxes, the way a lot of people on a fixed income did the exact year everything got more expensive, and now your building is officially distressed. So when you go to sell it to dig yourself out of the hole, you don't get to pick your buyer anymore. The government's standing at the front of the line. Sit with the audacity of that for a second. They raise your taxes, you fall behind in a down year, and the government glides right to the front of the line for your building. You see the pattern yet? Every slice comes wrapped in a reasonable sounding word, underdeveloped, distressed, and every one of those words they get to define. That's not sloppy writing. That's the knife. But wait, there's more. Next slice. This would be the fourth one. This one's dressed up as a gift. Section 7 again. The authority can step in as the buyer on behalf of the tenants to purchase a building right out from under its owner. Sounds generous. The tenants get their building. Except read the condition. When they do it, that building, quote, enters into the corporation's portfolio of permanently affordable residential projects. It doesn't go to the tenants free and clear. It goes into the government's portfolio. And there's a little phrase tucked in beside it. The state can do this through a tenant request or by any other lawful means. The tenants are one door in. They are not the only door. On behalf of the tenants, that's the warmest phrase in the whole bill. And watch what it's doing. It staples a family's face onto a government acquisition. The tenants are the wrapping paper. The state is what's in the box. And slice number 5, the last slice, for now. The one the whole machine was built to make feel normal by the time you finally got to it. Section 7, subsection 4. If a property is, quote, not for sale or auction, but is necessary for the corporation's purposes, the board can authorize taking it by eminent domain. Not when it comes up for sale. You didn't list it. You don't want to sell it. Doesn't matter. 9 people sign a certificate that says your property is necessary, and the machine starts moving. They'll pay you what they decide it's worth, and you don't get to say no. Necessary. One word. And it's the entire trigger. Not abandoned, not blighted, not dangerous. Just necessary. A word that means whatever those 9 people need it to mean that particular morning. And nowhere did they define this word. That's not an oversight. An undefined word is the most powerful kind there is. It's a blank check written in a legal font. And about those 9 people, 5 of them appointed, 3 handpicked by the governor, 2 are state commissioners who already run agencies, and the other 4, those are elected, but not by you. They're elected by the tenants who move into the buildings the board takes. So follow that. The only people who get a vote on this board are the ones who benefit when it takes your building. You, the owner, get nothing. You've got no say. Now, and I'm doing this here on purpose because I want you checking me on it. The people who love this bill are going to say, I'm scaring you. They'll say, look at Section 5. Section 5 says eminent domain only applies to vacant land. And they're right. Section 5 does say that. But read Section 7. Because in Section 7, they wrote the eminent domain power a second time. And this time, the word vacant is gone. It just says not for sale and necessary. So the bill says 2 different things in 2 different places. And there's only one question that matters. When a bill contradicts itself, which version do you think the agency's lawyers reach for? The narrow one or the broad one? That's how they legislate. The comforting version goes in Section 5. For the news anchors to read out loud. The real one goes into Section 7 for the lawyers to use. So that's 5 ways in. Here's what happens once your property's inside. Everything the authority takes becomes, their word, permanently affordable. And permanent here isn't a mood. It's a covenant. They staple it right to the deed. It stays there forever. Permanent means it never comes back. They didn't build affordable housing. They seized it and forced it. Now, let's do the math, because this is where the whole promise falls apart. Permanently affordable means the rent stays low forever. Most people will probably be for that because it sounds great until you remember a building doesn't run on good intentions. It runs on a roof, a boiler, insurance, repairs, and every one of those costs has been climbing 6, 7, 8% a year. So here's the arithmetic nobody in that bill wants to do out loud. Costs go up fast. The rent, by law, can't. It's all being engineered so that the property eventually does become distressed. But, and here's the unavoidable reality of it all, it doesn't matter who owns the place. A landlord, a nonprofit, the city of New York, because math is math. When the money coming in can't keep up with the money going out, something has to give. The rent stays frozen. The building falls apart. The repairs get deferred, then the maintenance, then the heat goes out in February and stays out because the line item to fix it doesn't exist anymore. Anyone who's ever stepped a foot into government housing already knows exactly how this movie ends. And here's the part that should stop you cold. The people this bill swears it's protecting, the tenants, are the ones who get left standing in the cold hallway. They didn't get housing. They got a landlord who legally cannot afford to fix the boiler and a rule book that made sure of it. Now, I can't prove this, but history says this is where it's all headed. This isn't about affordable housing at all. Affordable housing is the wrapper. Because if the actual goal were more housing, you'd build more housing. You wouldn't need eminent domain on occupied buildings. You wouldn't need to cap appreciation at 2% and weld it to the deed forever. Those two things don't build a single new apartment. They do exactly one thing. They move property permanently out of private hands and into the state's hands, and they make sure it never comes back. That's not a housing program. That's a transfer. And the second you see it as a transfer, every reasonable slice snaps into line. They're not sloppy, they're sequenced. Let's hope I'm wrong. But in the Marine Corps, we had a saying, hope is not a plan. You don't hope the perimeter holds. You go walk it, and you secure the gaps yourself before the unfriendlies find them before you. Securing the perimeter starts with your country, then your state, then your city, and then you run a red file audit on your home. You audit your deed, your bank setup, your digital footprint, legal exposure and liabilities. You look for the holes before anyone else. Like and subscribe. That's what I share here with you on every episode. But if you'd like some private help to secure your home's perimeter in one swoop, go to protectmyhome.inc and we'll walk you through each level of your home's financial and logistical security. It's not free, but most homeowners find double the investment in just junk fees and tax leaks before we even finish the second pillar of the red file audit. And if we can't find you at least 3 real vulnerabilities in what you've got right now, 100% refund. Go to protectmyhome.inc and pick a time that's convenient for you. In Section 2 of this bill, it lays out its purpose in writing, and it says the goal is to insulate housing from, quote, the greed of private ownership. Well, the goal of this channel is to insulate your home from the greed of government overreach. That's the whole salami. Slice 1 was the rent freeze. The last slice is private property itself, your private property. And the thing is, they're not hiding it. They wrote it down, they said it, and they got elected. And more DSA reps are on the ballots in November. We're not talking about isolated states anymore. The Homes Act was just introduced in Congress to take this national. The same framework, nearly word for word as New York's bill. What starts as one state's experiment becomes the model everybody copies. Your state is next, unless we can stop it at the voting booth. And that's not a scare line. That's just how this thing is traveling and how fast it's going. And that's why I pulled this one out here for you to watch next. You know, most are going to watch this one and think it's only about billionaires. Others will think it's a Democrat versus Republican debate. And they would both be wrong. If you own a home, whether you're rich or not, whether you vote red or blue, your private property is equally at risk. Watch this one next. God loves you, and so do I. Take care.